condition in a hospital, the 5-year-old girl and her carer. To be clear, the riot on Thursday night was organised. It was organised by Ireland's far right, by individuals and groups who openly proclaim their racist stance and their fascistic politics. And they will be emboldened by what happened on Thursday night. We've already seen a black worker in a supermarket being threatened with a knife, and we see far-right organisations in Europe who have shed blood and who have killed, and the far-right in Ireland can follow in their footsteps, be clear in relation to that. This government failed to listen and failed to pay sufficient attention when migrants reported that they were being targeted with race hate, when asylum seekers were protested at reception centres, when the LGBTQ plus community reported a sharp increase in hate crimes, and when library workers were targeted and repeatedly threatened. The government are also responsible for the social conditions that underlie much of the rioting and the looting. To be clear, we are totally opposed to the rioting and the looting, but we are not blind to the fact that much of it is underlain by social conditions that this government and successive governments are responsible for. I'm a deputy for Cork North Central, and the most serious action that has been taken against the far right in Cork has been taken by library workers. When library workers, along with 400 supporters, along with the LGBTQ plus community, marched from the steps of the library to the City Hall and said, back off with the harassment and the intimidation tactics. I think the bus workers who took the buses off the streets on health and safety grounds on Thursday night, that it was a significant action, and I think the protest yesterday at the GPO, attended by several thousand, was an important action as well. But a clear message that we want to send today is that these actions by workers now need to be stepped up. Nearly every workplace in the country is multi-ethnic now, and in the buses, I believe there are people working on the buses from 89 different countries, and we want to strongly encourage discussions to take place this week, urgent discussions in every workplace about how best to protect migrant workers and workers who might be particularly vulnerable in the current situation, who go to work in the morning feeling nervous, feeling fearful, who aren't showing up to work because they're nervous and fearful, or the kids showing up to school. How can we help? How can we protect people on their way to work, at work, and on their way home from work? How can we show solidarity and show that an injury to one is an injury to all? And we think that the unions need to put resources behind those discussions so that those anti-racist discussions and organisation in every workplace is nourished, is developed, and can be developed to the point that we bring together people on a city centre basis, we bring together people on a citywide basis and on a national basis to combat the far right and the ideas of the far right, such as the example that was shown by the library workers in Cork and by other examples. Sinead? Okay.
Just to start to say what happened on Thursday with the horrific stabbing of children was, I think, really shocking for people across our city, across the country, really horrifying. that such a thing could happen, that children could be attacked in such a way. It's a time when really the city of Dublin and the country should be uniting around the victims, around the families of the victims, giving every possible support to them in this just horrendous, nightmarish time. It is sickening that a group of far-right agitators instead saw this as an opportunity to spread hate, division, and to foment a riot on our streets, and that's precisely what happened. I mean, if you look at all those who rushed to defend the children, white Irish, Brazilian immigrant, Filipino nurse, it reflects the diverse society that we have and the best of humanity. People putting their lives on the line just instinctively to say we're going to protect children. But what the far right are out to do is to divide people and to really spread their agenda of hate, of racism and of division. There's a couple of points I want to make on this. One is I want to draw people's attention that last night there were two serious incidents. One, People Before Profit was hosting a Palestinian solidarity meeting in Clondalkin, in Bonogue, with Gino Kenny, and a Palestinian from Gaza whose wife has been killed in the Israeli onslaught of Gaza, and who's still trying to get his family out of Gaza. And far-right agitators disgustingly tried to interrupt and prevent that meeting from going ahead. That is an attack not just on People Before Profit, not just on Gino Kenny, who's an exemplary representative of ordinary working class people fighting on a whole range of causes for years, but it's an attack on the Palestinian solidarity movement. The meeting did go ahead. They weren't able to get into the room to be able to stop it.
How many people murdered?
I just saw the videos of it. Looked like 6, 7, 8 people, something like that, but I can try and find out more. Around the same time, Mary Lou McDonald was at some event in East Wall, and a swarm of far-right agitators, including quite well-known people like Avon Pepper, came around her, accused her of having blood on her hands. And again there, it's interesting, if you listen to the audio of both videos, in both occasions one of the far-right agitators shouts "fuck Palestine," right? Because they're offended that the solidarity that is very widespread of ordinary people with the Palestinian people. And I do think the Palestinian solidarity movement as a whole has to see this as an attack on our movement and fight back. The other point I want to make is, the government response is to have a law and order response, is to say this is the moment to pass the hate crime legislation, this is the moment to pass the facial recognition technology. And this is opportunistic. It's opportunistic in a sense of the wish to be seen to do something in response to what took place. And secondly, to drive through legislation giving more repressive powers to the state that they already wanted to drive through. And I just want to be absolutely clear. Facial recognition technology, hate speech legislation is not needed to deal with those who incited this violence. The people are online. They have their names in their own profiles in their own name on Twitter, on Telegram, voices that are highly recognisable, calling for people to come out and effectively calling for people to engage in the riot. So it's absolutely clear. Similarly, the state did not need extra powers to say you can't go in and harass librarians, you can't go in and harass homeless migrant people. Those things are already against the law. At the moment in Leitrim, in the course of a week, 3 different checkpoints have been set up asking people for passports and not allowing people to go by in case that they're asylum seekers. That is currently against the law, and the state should be acting to allow people to go about their business as opposed to seeking extra powers opportunistically using this moment. The last and separate point I want to make is about the triple lock. I think what Micheál Martin announced last week is a very, very serious assault on our neutrality. That is what this is about. This is about the freeing the hands of this government or future governments to send significant numbers of Irish troops abroad in missions that are not within the framework of the UN Charter. That is what this is about. Very, very clearly, if it was not for the triple lock, instead of the government providing support for the US invasion of Iraq through the use of Shannon Airport, we could have had a situation of Irish soldiers sent to fight and die in a war for US oil and profits. That's the truth of it. And there's a very important question that I think the media should be asking the Taoiseach, because he's repeatedly said we want to get rid of the triple lock, but don't worry, we will only ever send troops abroad within the framework of the UN Charter. You need to ask him, what operations is he talking about? What operations do exist that are illegal within the UN Charter and yet would fall outside of the triple lock? There are not any. Right? So under the UN Charter, there are two legal ways that you can send significant numbers of troops abroad. One is in self-defence, which is already provided for in the Constitution, does not require the triple lock to be activated and so on. Or the second is in missions that are authorised by the UN Security Council. In other words, the triple lock. And the only concrete example he has given so far is to say, it could be peace missions by regional security organisations, like implicitly the European Union or the African Union. But Article 53 of the UN Charter is very clear that while those organisations can exist, that they're not operating within the framework of the UN Charter without the endorsement of the UN Security Council. So what sort of missions is it that Micheál Martin wants to send troops abroad in? And the truth is, it is to free the hand of the government to send troops abroad in things like the invasion of Iraq, things like the invasion of Afghanistan, and that's why we're going to be working extremely hard to build a mass movement of opposition to say, at the very, very least, you need to put this to a referendum of the people, because there's no way there is public support for this attack on neutrality.
Yeah, I just want to make some comments on the really outrageous move by the Israeli government to, quote, reprimand the Irish ambassador for comments or a tweet made by the Taoiseach about the release of Emily Hand. And I think, quite honestly, it really beggars belief that Israel, a state that over the last 5 or 6 weeks has massacred 15,000, maybe close to 20,000 innocent civilians, thousands of children, and displaced over 1 million innocent Palestinians, would have the neck to reprimand an Irish government official for completely innocuous comments about the freeing of a hostage. And I think people need to understand that, in fact, this reprimand is not particularly directed at what Leo Varadkar said, but in fact is an exercise in the most cynical deflection by Israel to try and distract attention from the global clamour for Israel to be held accountable for war crimes, for crimes against humanity, and for very likely genocide in its actions in Gaza over recent weeks. And really, it's pathetic that the Irish government have been so meek in their response to this reprimand, rather than calling out Israel for this obvious cynical deflection. They expressed bewilderment. They went out of their way to sort of qualify what they were saying, instead of naming what Israel is doing as further evidence that this is a rogue state that is completely out of control and that needs to be held accountable and punished for the massacre it has inflicted on Gaza, and which it is promising to recommence very likely in the coming days. So we will be seriously challenge the government. To our mind, this reprimand is further evidence of the need to expel the Israeli ambassador from this country and to impose very severe and significant sanctions on the state of Israel for its crimes in Gaza and for its ongoing crimes of apartheid, of ethnic cleansing, and of illegal occupation. In that regard, we will also be calling on our government to cease engaging in any trade with Israel, particularly in the area of arms. I mean, we're for a complete boycott and sanctions in terms of Israel for its crimes, but Deputy Murphy here, Paul Murphy, got a PQ answer in the last week which showed that one of the major Israeli arms manufacturers, Elbit Systems, that produce much of the weaponry that was deployed to kill people in Gaza, that the Irish government has €4 million worth of contracts with this Israeli arms manufacturer over the last few years. Now, we think that is absolutely outrageous, that the Irish government should be in any way supporting or sustaining the Israeli arms industry when those arms are being used to massacre and kill innocent civilians. Just last thing I just want to briefly comment on, and I know there's a lot on the agenda this week, but later in the week the new planning and development bill is coming in. There's an awful lot of stuff in it, but one of the things we will be saying, in the light of the absolutely shocking, shameful new record figures on homelessness in this country, is that this is further evidence of the failure of the government to deliver the scale of social and affordable housing necessary to address this absolutely dire housing and homelessness crisis. And one of the things we will be seeking to amend the planning and development bill is to dramatically increase the required provision of social and affordable housing in developments, in new developments. Currently, only 10% social housing and 10% affordable housing is required in planning permissions for new developments. In other words, 80% of what is being built in this country at the moment is unaffordable. Unaffordable rents, unaffordable house prices, and this is a major contributory factor to the housing and homelessness crisis. So we believe that should be dramatically increased to a level of 50 or 60%, which, by the way, places like Vienna in Austria have those sort of conditions. What is the point in building stuff that nobody can afford in the midst of a housing crisis? So we believe there should be a radical change in planning and development policy in this country to ensure that the housing that is built is actually affordable for ordinary working people, because it is clear the housing and homelessness crisis is spiralling out of control.
If there's a vote of no confidence in the Minister, we will vote no confidence in the Minister. We have no confidence in the Minister. We have no confidence in the government. They failed to listen to the migrant community, to the LGBTQ plus community, to library workers and other workers when they said the far right needed to be taken seriously. And they are responsible for the social conditions that have given rise to much of the rioting and the looting. We're totally opposed to the rioting and the looting, absolutely, but we're not blind to the fact that the social conditions are a factor, and the government have more than a hand in that. With no confidence in the Minister, no confidence in the government, and we need to see action from the workers' movement in relation to tackling racism and the far right in society.